A couple years ago I picked up this old school desk and modified it to be my welding cart and welding table, and it worked fantastic for the time being. But some things have changed and I need to make some changes along with that. The first thing that changed is I got a new welder setup. I'll give you a hint, it's red. It's a fantastic welder. And oh, by the way, these bags right here make fantastic welder covers. The new welder has the ability to MIG weld. So I've got a tank, got my regulators, and of course I have this hose. The hose from the tank basically acts like a tether, prevents me from moving this thing around the shop. So the plan right now is to build a new welding cart for the welder. This eventually I think will be a mobile shop table, shop cart. And then when I build my new workbench for the shop, I'm going to incorporate a platform or an area to weld on. So I've managed to scrounge up some of my finest junk. I've got parts of an old treadmill, a workout bench, an old bicycle trailer, some casters. Most of this is 1.5 inches by something, whether it's square or rectangular. I'm going to tear all this stuff apart, see what I've got in metal, and then come up with a design. So I've got everything broken down, separated into the probably going to use it pile, maybe need to use some of this pile, and the definitely don't need to use this pile. Plus, of course, I want to build a seat. So here's my concept drawing. It's rough, I know, but it's based off of what I have available, and I think I can probably do this mostly with the spare metal that I had laying around. What I have here is top shelf for the welder. It needs to be about 30 inches. That's kind of a minimum. It gives me a little bit of room to slide it back, keep the dials and the hoses that are sticking out the front away from getting bumped. And in the back I've got the power supply, but that can kind of hang over here. Bottom shelf is going to be a little bit bigger so that it can support the bottle. Then I'll have a safety strap on here to keep that bottle from tipping over and ending up in the next county. So based on that design, this is what the frame's going to look like. It's going to be 40 inches from the back of the rear tire to the front here. I've got it set up here so that I can use this counter basically as my baseline. here's what I ended up with after I broke down all that metal. I saved you guys the agony of watching me cut this down and grind it off and sand it. You're welcome. It's a lot of dust, sparks, and a lot of noise. These pieces right here are going to end up being the shelves of the cart. These pieces up here are going to end up being the frame. So I had to cut this off, the first one, because it was way off center. Thought that bolt would hold it where it needed to be. It did. Second one, it's a little better, still not great. So here we are, back with the first one, the third attempt. I'll see if that works better. Well, I figured out a solution to keep that nut in place while I tack it. A little dab of super glue. I'm sure someone out there already knew that, but I was clueless. Okay, so that is night and day. Now I'm just going to put this bolt in here just to protect the threads from any spatter. Seriously? Back at the drawing that I made for this welding cart, I've got a lot of lines here going on, and I've made a lot of changes just based on the material that I had and some tweaks with the measurements. But now I'm ready to make the upper frame. For that, I've got a 45-degree angle here that's going to meet with the lower frame. It's going to come up, it's going to run parallel with the frame across here, and then in the front I'll have a couple of real funky angles. I'm going to tack this together, tack this onto the frame, make sure that everything's going to lay out, and then I can figure out what these front angles are, finish those cuts, and hopefully get this frame welded up. So this is a bit of a cluster, but what I'm going to do now is figure out what this angle is coming off of the bottom frame, transfer that to here, because this piece is going to come down and meet right at the very front of this. In order to line that up, I'm just going to use a piece of spare steel here, make sure these two edges are butted up against each other, squeeze it tight, and then that will replicate my top surface. This one here is just going to come to the top corner of that upper frame piece there. Now I can draw some lines on here, replicate these angles, and finish these cuts. Now these lines right now are just for reference. They're not where I'm going to actually cut. I've got to move some things around and adjust the lengths. I ended up going back and using the T-bevel to make that line a little more accurate. Transferred it onto this piece of metal. Now we got to cut this off with a cut-off wheel. So our last cut that we need to make is going to join the front bar to the top bar here. This is the angle of that bar coming through from the front. What I've done is took the low and the high mark and I created a line that intersects those two. Put that on my T-bevel here. Then I also put that line on this piece. And so when these get cut and lined up, theoretically, they'll be on that angle right there, which is the angle they need to be to match. So I feel like I'm closing in on the finish line on this project. There are a few things that I need to do. I need to finish welding the frame. I need to weld this top shelf in place a little better. I need to make some caps for the frame, front and back. I need to build some brackets to hold the tank in place, and also a place to put a strap to keep the tank from falling over. Obviously that's a bad thing. I thought about welding some handles to the front and back, and I've kind of talked myself out of that. I think at this point it's just extra, doesn't really provide much. If I need to move it around, I can just grab it under the shelf or push it from the back, no big deal. I've also got to build the shelf for the top and the bottom for things to set on. All of my welding stuff lives in a cabinet, so I don't need a lot of hooks, but I may place a couple underneath, preferably on the inside, because I like the idea of coiling up the cords and the gun and tucking it all inside so I don't have a whole lot of things hanging outside of the car. Oh, I know this thing has a lot of ventilation, a lot of holes in here. I could go in and plug weld those. I think it's really just a waste of my consumables. If I was really concerned about the looks of this thing, I'd be getting out the body putty and finishing this off at the body shop. So those are going to stay, and we'll get it all welded up, get everything cleaned up, then hit it with some paint and assemble it, and we should be done here in no time at all.